Hello, everyone, and welcome to this evening's virtual event with Brookline Booksmith, featuring Rebecca Pacheco for her book, Still Life, in conversation with Joanna Raykoff. My name is Bonnie, and I'm a bookseller at Brookline Booksmith in Brookline, Massachusetts. If you're familiar with our store, welcome back, and if this is the first time you're hearing about us, welcome. We're very happy to have everyone here joining our community this evening, and we appreciate your support of Rebecca and an independent bookstore through your purchases and attendance. Now for introductions. Tonight's moderator, Joanna Raykoff, is a journalist, poet, critic, and novelist. She is the author of the novel A Fortunate Age, winner of the Goldberg Prize for Fiction, the Elle Readers Prize, and a San Francisco Chronicle bestseller. She is also the author of the international best-selling memoir, My Salinger Year, which has been adapted into film. She is a frequent contributor for the New York Times, Vogue, Marie Claire, and the Oprah magazine, among others. Joanna, it is a pleasure to have you back here with us tonight. And to introduce our author, Rebecca Pacheco is the author of Do Your Own Thing, which was named one of the top 10 yoga and meditation books every yogi needs by Yoga Journal. Rebecca is a Cape Cod native and current resident of Boston, and she's been practicing yoga and studying meditation and Eastern philosophy since her teens. In addition to her work in yoga and mindfulness, she is a marketing professional, educator, activist, and writer. She is a contributor for the Boston Globe, and she has video projects that have appeared in Runner's World and Women's Health. Her latest book is Still Life, The Myths and Magic of Mindful Living, which we are here to celebrate tonight. Still Life is a book which offers a thorough look at mindfulness and meditation in contemporary living. In it, Pacheco unpacks the myths and misconceptions that often surround mindfulness. She gives her readers concrete tools to develop a mindfulness practice and provides inspiration for how readers can implement these habits in their lives. Still Life argues that a contemplative life isn't synonymous with bliss, but rather requires a degree of mental, emotional, and spiritual grappling, and encourages its readers to challenge themselves to apply this wisdom to their own lives. It is such a pleasure to have you both here tonight. Please, everyone, welcome Rebecca Pacheco and Joanna Raykoff.
Thank you, Bonnie.
Thank you so much. So everyone out there, thank you so much for coming and welcome. And Brookline Booksmith and Bonnie, thank you so much. I know Rebecca will probably say more about this, but both of us love your shop, are frequent buyers there, in my case, to a fault. So it's always a pleasure to do an event for you guys. So basically what's going to happen is I'm going to talk for a few seconds about how much I love Rebecca and a little bit about her history. And then she's going to read from Still Life, which I'm really, really excited to hear. I haven't yet heard her read from it. And then we're going to talk for a bit. And before I say anything, I just want to mention Bonnie told you that there's a Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. And because of the nature of online events, it would be great if you could type your questions for Rebecca as they arise in your brain, rather than waiting for toward the end of the event to put them in. That way I can gauge how many questions there are and know when to stop for audience questions. So when you have a question for her, just type it into the Q&A box, not the chat, the Q&A box, and I will sort of keep looking at that as we move forward. But first, I just want to say how excited I am to be here tonight. So in 2015, I was traveling constantly. I would sort of go out for 3 weeks or 4 weeks in Australia or India or Germany, and everywhere in the US. And my Salinger Year had come out the year before, and I think it was just coming out in paperback. And I basically have been traveling continuously for more than a year. And
so just like now, just like today.
Just like the pandemic, exactly. Yes, we're like, if only you could see beyond the frame here, where there's like my entire life, like
a lifetime ago.
So one of the final stops on this giant endless tour was the Nantucket Literary Festival or Book Festival, which I had not even registered. This is going to sound like actually annoying, I'm realizing, but like, just forgive me. But I was going to so many festivals that and it wasn't set up for me. Like my publisher was doing this, that I didn't even honestly like think so much about it. Like they would just be like, here's your ticket, you're going. And I've never been to Nantucket. I'm from New York. I'm not a New Englander. And I had a vague idea of what Nantucket was. I was like, people wear pink shorts there, right? Isn't that the Nantucket thing? And I don't know. But when I told people that I was going, they were all like, whoa, that's exciting. That's amazing. Anyway, point is that I arrived in Nantucket, having taken, like, as I'm sure Rebecca did, like a 5-seater plane there on which I almost threw up. And I was absolutely terrified of this venture. It was like I got to the airport and like didn't even know what was happening, and then like got out onto the tarmac and was like, oh my God, no, I'm not getting on that. But I did. And I was also pregnant, like in the early stages of pregnancy. So that contributed to the throwing upness. And so I arrived at the opening night cocktail party in a really weird state. Like I was insanely overtired. There had been a lot of throwing up. I was truly a mess. And I was sort of standing at this party shell shocked. And so you would think I would be excited and grateful to be on Nantucket at a cocktail party, but I was just like trying to not throw up and was like, I don't have the energy to make conversation with anyone at this party. I just can't. And so many people who were smarter than me had brought their spouses or partners or children even with them, because they were like, I'm going to Nantucket. But it didn't even occur to me that this was an idyllic place to go. I just was like, this is part of the job. This is all way more than you need to know. Point is that I was standing at the cocktail party and this like extraordinarily gorgeous woman wearing like this very dramatic, like very New Yorky jumpsuit that was like very low cut and drapey and like very sort of like helmet long, like minimalist, amazing, not what you ever see on Nantucket. That's why I needed to set this for you. And not really like, honestly, like not like you ever see in Boston, no offense, Boston, but like very not Boston, very, very like Tribeca, like Williamsburg-y sort of jumpsuit. I was like, are you Joanna Raykoff? And I was like, I am. And this person was Rebecca Pacheco. And I was like, what is this person doing here? Like, who is this? It was like, we were surrounded by all of these very preppy people. And I immediately loved her. And now we are friends. And so anyway, but the little thing more, there's actually that.
I forgot pink shorts. And so the only thing left was a very chic jumpsuit.
Right. I was actually wearing pink, but not like the Nantucket pink. But the more important thing to say, that's not the end of the story. It's just that, so I'm like a very, very long time practitioner of yoga, though I don't really talk about it. And people who know me well know this about me and will sometimes make fun of me for like positioning my kids like Scooby-Doo figurines and yoga poses and taking pictures of them and posting them on social media and be like, Joanna, can you like stop with the yoga? But in general, it's something that is just sort of like my own private thing. I do practice almost every day. And I started before, like Rebecca, something we're going to talk a lot about, I hope, but I started practicing before yoga was in vogue, like before
yoga pants.
Yes, before there were yoga pants. Was it wasn't it Christy Turlington who was like on the cover of Time magazine?
That was, I think, 2001 or 2002. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, that was sort of the tipping point.
That was the tipping point. And
I mean, prior to that, you had Madonna went on Rosie O'Donnell in about 1999, and she said she had like feng shuied her life of her treadmill and she only did yoga. So there was like that. And then Christy Turlington on Time was another lightning rod moment for yoga.
Right.
But
and Madonna
yeah, we started before yoga pants. What's that?
Madonna had like the crazy arms and people were like, that's from Ashtanga. And then suddenly
it was.
Yes. and this is like maybe interesting vaguely to people out there, probably not, but whatever. But my friend Amanda, her brother is Eddie Stern, who's like this
Oh,
legendary Ashtanga teacher, and his Ashtanga studio in New York, like suddenly was just like overflowing with people after that Madonna
yeah.
thing. Whereas like previously there had been like 5 people there for his 6 a.m.,
Yeah.
series. But so anyway, Rebecca like introduced herself to me, and I, was sort of thinking like, I don't know, like at most literary festivals, you just sort of have like, there'll be like a sort of, I don't know, let's call it like a Leanne Moriarty sort of like world. There'll be like the super ultra popular, like at that festival, I think like Scott Turow was there.
Yeah.
Right. And then, but then like most people, and presumably those people are being paid like $1 gazillion to appear there. And then there's everyone else who's like being paid nothing. And you're like lucky to be there. And so I was one of those. And so
Likewise. Likewise.
and then yes, and then
But
and
you don't have to dress that way. You can dress like they're paying you a lot.
you can dress like you're the person who speaks, who has like does
Right.
like the keynote address.
I didn't know that.
And so I was imagining that everyone there was fell into one of these categories, like mass market writer or like a more sort of like fiction, nonfiction. And so I was so intrigued when Rebecca explained she was there for her previous book, her first book, Do Your Own Thing. And I wanted to just like corner her and ask her everything about her life. And anyway, that was way more than I was going to say. But really, what I like, the tiny little thing that should have been the focus of this is just that Rebecca and I became friends, and she's been like, this is so cheesy to say, but kind of like a light in my life. And that, there are people who I'm sure everyone, like when Rebecca, I'm sure when you were like 14, everyone was like, you're an old soul. Like everyone must have told you that for your whole life. But it's true. Like there's a way in which like I can say to Rebecca, I'm having a really bad day, and like either she'll say something that will make me laugh, or she'll say something that sort of takes me out of the moment that I am in. It can be anything at all. And I feel so grateful to have her as a friend, and I've learned so much from her about life, not just from her books, but from her person. And there's a way in which, both of her books are filled with such, and I'm going to talk more about this later in my questions, but they're filled with such incredible warmth and wisdom. I don't read yoga books like ever, despite having done yoga for a million years. And when I read Do Your Own Thing, like I was actually like filling out the questionnaires in it, and it really did kind of change my life, honestly. Like it was such an incredible book, not just as a yoga book, but as a book about how do you live your life? Like, what are you doing? And not in like a self-helpy sort of way, but almost more in like the way one might read a memoir, say like a memoir like Wild, which I think I may have compared it to, I think in my blurb, like where you read a memoir about the choices that a writer makes, a person makes, and the experiences that they have, and it makes you re-examine your own. And that's how I felt about both Do Your Own Thing and Still Life. So, but that's also how I feel about Rebecca in life. Like she's a rare and extraordinary human, and I feel so lucky to know her, and so lucky to be here tonight. Okay, that was way more than I was going to say. Oh my God, sorry. I really never do this. I swear, I did an event for the Booksmith last week, and I did not talk for more than a few minutes. So
you do them almost every week.
Seriously, but this is my last one. So okay, now Rebecca is going to read from us.
I will.
Read from us. Read for us from Still Life. So
thank you for that. I am so happy we're friends. I will say that what you said about Do Your Own Thing was always what I hoped people would get, which is that even being a very experienced yogi myself, I found it hard to read yoga books. They were either extremely traditional and heady, very heady, or they were like references. You know, there wasn't a lot that was writerly and like you would curl up in bed and read. And so that was always the thing that I wanted to do. So I'm so happy that you said that. Tonight, I have the newest edition. Little Baby Still Life is about 2 weeks old. And you were so helpful to me on its journey. So I'm happy to celebrate with you, but also, you know, you've been through it with me with this one, and I appreciate that. So I'm going to read a little bit from the beginning, short, and then a little bit from toward the end. And oddly, the two, I think, kind of speak to each other nicely. And I didn't realize that till today. So I'm reading from a chapter that has become kind of a favorite for people. I've done some interviews lately, and they really relate to a certain passage. It's a chapter on the myth of this will fix me, in that we come to meditation because we feel there's something within us that is wrong, that needs to be fixed. And so this tries to dispel that myth. And then later on, I'm going to read a little bit. It's funny, Bonnie picked out in my bio that I'm a Cape Cod native. I'm going to read a little story from when I was in middle school. And Joanna mentioned me being an old soul when I was young. So maybe I was feeling that energy. So here we go. We come to meditation or therapy or yoga or pottery or birding because we hope it will fix some faulty wiring in our heart or mind or both. The job stress, parenting burnout, or existential dread have become too much. A shadow of loneliness falls across our inner landscape in the winter months, or we're having difficulty keeping the nipping dog of our personality hidden behind a tidy fence so as not to scare the neighbors. Worry, trauma, grief, low self-esteem, codependency, something we can't name because it keeps changing. It doesn't go away, it just morphs from solid to liquid to gas. You can fix this, right, Doc? If I'm honest, this is still a seductive thought for me. I have to catch myself. Technically, I have to catch the voice of my ego, which relentlessly aims to convince me that something is wrong. I am wrong, and I must make adjustments. The ego is who we think we are, and the soul is really, really who we are, Ram Dass says. Here's what the soul would say. I'm here for you anyway. Imagine if you told a dear friend, I'm sorry, I can't be with you in your time of need until you organize the closets, lose 10 pounds, or earn an advanced degree. What horrible nonsense. And yet we do this to ourselves all the time. We leave ourselves incrementally in the moment when we don't want to feel something, when the moment is uncomfortable, or for longer periods, which would be unacceptable to our friends. This negligence would be unacceptable to most goldfish or houseplants. I don't want to name names or point fingers, so I'll speak for myself only. I have in moments treated myself with less care than a houseplant. The soul says, whoa, whoa, whoa. A friend is needed here, not another story, ego. No more advice, please. You are not an entity to be fixed because you are not a fixed entity. You do not need to be fixed because you are not broken, merely human. And meditation is not self-improvement. It is self-acceptance. It is befriending the self. It heals, resolves, and improves a great many things, which is somewhat ironic. But we don't do it to fix ourselves. Like a friend, meditation is available for you right now as you are. It cannot be another way. Not only is this what's best for you, it's what's possible. Remember, you are not an immovable, static, permanent you. If we ask, will this fix me? Mindfulness might counter by asking, who is the me? What can we point to? We all think we know, but this is a fundamental myth of how we see the world and ourselves. It's one of the underlying principles of what mindfulness is and how it works. You, me, we are impermanent concepts. We are in process all the time. And then if it's not too much, I'll read a little bit about one of the versions of me that was in process as a kid. It's in a paragraph about nature and just being in nature as mindfulness practice. And it's about a page and a half. The apex experience of my life in 6th grade was a field trip to the Cape Cod National Seashore. 40 miles of protected beaches, teeming marshes, and lively ponds filled with tiny hermit crabs and hulking sea lions and birds so lovely they drop your jaw. The whole grade went. Our lives that year measured in relation to the overnight trip. There was life before the National Seashore and after. We, boys and girls together, would stay in hostel accommodations while learning about sea life, climate change, and more. We would stay in separate cabins, of course, but we would be in the same vicinity well after school hours. Can you imagine? We would eat dinner together, actual dinner. There might be a joint session of toothbrushing. Rumors circulated of popcorn and entertainment, not a movie. There were no TVs, but something. The rumors were true. There was popcorn and a production of Dr. Seuss's environmentally minded The Lorax performed by the camp staff. So it was off Broadway, but excellent. The defining moment of the trip was going to the beach at night. The cold sand sifted through our sneakers as we walked closer than usual. Rather than a straggling, ambling amoeba of adolescents teasing and jostling each other, we bound together like a school of silvery fish. We were still kids walking toward the raging ocean after dark, whether we wanted to admit it or not. Development near the National Seashore is strictly regulated, so there's little light pollution or artificial noise. When we arrived at the ocean's edge, our teachers instructed us to crouch down and trail our hands through the icy water, swishing them back and forth several times. It's like the technique one uses to brush crumbs off the couch. Withheld from us for the briefest moment was why we were doing this. What would happen? Thousands of glowing specks illuminated from our fingertips like magic. Embers, but in water. Not hot or dangerous like fireworks, but brilliant all the same. Instead of shooting skyward, they appeared in the ocean before our eyes. Shrieks of delight bounced between the dunes and the open fall air. We had witnessed bioluminescent phytoplankton for the first time. I will be 12 years old forever in this moment. The joy is so visceral that it feels possible that the adult me was somehow there, recording the experience for my future self. This spectacular and singular moment of being dazzled and dumbstruck by nature. The middle school years are often characterized by the race to be a teenager, to get braces, to go to awkward school dances, to drive a car someday. But in this instant, I couldn't have imagined being anywhere other than where I was. I believe this is what Buddhists mean when they say we are awareness itself, how the self is not fixed or tethered to temporary or superficial characteristics. Every cell in our bodies turns over multiple times between childhood and adulthood, and again, multiple times throughout life. Awareness remains. Without attending to our awareness, life happens to us with the volatility of crashing waves. With attention, the waves don't cease, and they can still be vicious. We recognize that we are much more than the surface water. We have calmer, deeper, quieter depths. We're not the waves, but the whole ocean. Or as Thich Nhat Hanh says, quote, enlightenment is when a wave realizes it is the ocean.
I'm so glad you read that section, which I love so much, because it relates directly to, I think, the first thing I want to ask you, which is, as both Bonnie and I mentioned, you were drawn to yoga and meditation very early in life. And I wondered if you could just talk a little bit about that, like both about what actually happened, your actual path. And also, I guess I just wondered, listening to you read, if the natural world in which you grew up led you down this path in some ways.
It's funny, I think Yes, I think the things that really moved me when I was that age are still really prominent. I think that's goes for a lot of people, and maybe a lot of writers, just because of that way of observing the world and getting obsessed with things. So my yoga obsession began when I was 16 years old. Yoga was not cool, as we were joking. You know, I like to joke that we didn't have yoga pants. We just had pants and you could wear them to yoga. And I got into it for the same reason that, you know, any teenager gets into anything, which is I knew someone older and cooler who did it. And that was the driver superficially. I mean, that's how I have told the story for a long time. But as an adult looking back, I can see even more clearly that being an adolescent is really tumultuous. It's hard. It's awkward. It is defined by belonging or feeling like you don't belong. And so what happened with that first yoga class, you know, maybe the older, cooler girl that I knew got me to that first class. I wanted to, you know, emulate her in a way. But once I got there, I did feel, you know, a deep sense of belonging, even though I should have stood out and I should have felt so out of place. I mean, I was 16 and the other yogis around me were not even older than my parents, but older than my grandparents. I mean, this is like a retirement community on Cape Cod at the rec center. Yoga studios did not exist quite yet. They were in their nascent stages. We did yoga in church basements. We did yoga in rec centers. You know, maybe some of the participants were there too, I'm sure. And, you know, I just felt welcomed. I felt my teacher, I felt just knew that I needed to be there. And that's what started the journey. And then, you know, with meditation, that actually came a little bit later. It came a little bit more academically. Once I was in college, I started studying these, you know, the origins of yoga and meditation and what we were then calling sacred arts of India. And I think that is also kind of what informed my writing now. But back then, you know, that was the driver, the impetus for it was that academic angle. You know, you can see it in this book even more clearly. I even recount the story of the Buddha on, you know, on the eve of his enlightenment. That's a story that I've related to and carried with me for 20 years. So yeah, I got an early start. I became maybe obsessed and I'm still writing and exploring those things as best I can.
So speaking of the Buddha famously, you know, abandoned his wife and children on his path to enlightenment.
Not so famously though. I mean, many people don't actually know that part.
Yeah, I guess that's true. You know, like as an aside, I always say to you, I don't know anything about meditation, but I guess I have a husband. For those of you out there, my husband has a hardcore meditation practice. Maybe I'm attracted to meditators. And so I guess maybe I know a little bit, maybe it's famously in our household. Like my kids know
Right.
that.
Yeah.
But so maybe not, yeah, no, I didn't realize that. So not so famously abandoned his.
No. It's fair to say, but I think like the layperson probably doesn't know that.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. I'm assuming too much knowledge of the Buddha. And so, okay. So the reason I mention this is because from my understanding, the Buddha kind of acknowledged the difficulty of a meditation practice in the structure of a family.
Yes.
Now, you, first of all, you wrote this book just after having your first child. And that I also want to ask you about that. But I am curious. I mean, meditation is a very difficult practice to maintain once you become a parent, particularly a mother. There's no getting around that. We can't not talk about the gender disparity there. And yet meditation is, of course, extremely helpful when you're a parent. How has your meditation practice changed since having a child? And also, how has it helped you?
Yeah. Well, I write about this in the book, and it was kind of unavoidable. It was not intended, but it was such a shift in perspective. I mean, anyone who has a child knows how it shifts your perspective, how it changes things. And so I talk about in the walking chapter, for example, how I was a devout meditator. I meditated daily for at least 5 years. And then I had a baby, and you can probably guess what happened. I stopped meditating. It was impossible. The sleep deprivation in those new days is just so severe that I would try to sit down. I remember putting, my daughter in her crib and sitting on her floor and thinking, okay, I can do this. She's asleep. The house is quiet. This is the perfect opportunity. And I'd close my eyes and just start to bob and weave and almost immediately be sleeping upright practically. And the shocking part was that I actually, in the beginning, didn't miss it. In the beginning, there was so much to tend to. And I did find that my meditation, that my mindfulness was there, that it was like, it was there to lean on. It was this net that caught me for a time. It was how I was able to tend to the present moment, moment after moment after moment, because that's all a baby knows. When a baby is hungry, there's only hunger. When a baby is in pain, there's only pain, So, when a baby is smiling, like the world stops and there is just that smile. It's very easy to be present in that way and for a time. And then, I crashed hard. And my life was also very sedentary just by nature of nursing a baby and rocking a baby. And so I couldn't carve out the time for formal practice for meditation. And what got me back was actually walking meditation in my neighborhood in Boston. It was an unintended moment, but it kind of brought me home. And that's what I hope this book does for people, is sort of, you made a joke about how much you know about meditation that you don't even realize that you know. And so that's what I hope people get from this book, is just a realization of the resources that they do have, or the things that they do know, or the activities in your life already that put you in a state of deep concentration, or that put you in the moment, and how you can go back to them, how meditation is always a process of beginning again, starting over. So yeah, I'm happy that the motherhood is in there. Like I said, it was sort of a book from its beginning to its end changes many times. And this one certainly did. The pandemic also changed things. So I now feel like, how could I have written this book without it? But that motherhood piece is now it feels essential to its life.
Yeah, there's so much that I want to ask you about this. I mean, the world of meditation is a very male-dominated world. And what is it like being a woman, not just a woman, but a woman writing about motherhood in that world? Did you feel like you were kind of carving your own path? Like, did this book feel kind of trailblazing to you?
I wouldn't be that, I hope it's trailblazing to someone, but I didn't think of it like that. I think that would be too much pressure as you're writing. I think more it was just the lens through which I was seeing life. And so the intention was always to write a book about meditation for real life. And my life got really real. and also there were a lot of obstacles writing this book. I can't even pretend that there weren't. And so the joke became, if you say you want to write a book about meditation in real life really steps up to see if you mean it. And I had to, really mean it. And the wild part was that for as intense as the writing process is, for how, fraught it is with self-doubt, where I would go was always the same. Where I would go was, meditation. It was my mat. It was, you know, how I would find steadiness, how I would regroup. And so even when the writing about meditation was driving me crazy, the actual meditation was bringing me back into balance. And so there was this recommitment with each iteration of the book and kind of each period of my life in which I was writing, where I had to find the essence of it again and again. And it gave me a lot of empathy. I mean, you know, how bonkers that there are all these women in the world meditating, or rather, how bonkers is it that life itself begins with motherhood in some form, and it's kind of absent in many mindfulness resources, right? Unless it's a book about mindfulness for parents or for motherhood or for children or something. So I like that it's actually, you know, it's not marketed that way. It's just part of real life, and it's still life. So I'm happy that that's something that people are connecting to.
Yeah, I'm going to ask you a couple more questions about meditation and then move on to writing, to get a little further into some of the things you've touched on. So, okay, just touching on that, you talk in the book, and I heard you speak so wonderfully on Zibby Owen's podcast about the idea of speaking kindly to yourself, which is sort of a part of meditation. And I wondered if you could talk a little bit to us about that. And the reason I'm sort of latching this question onto the last one is because in that interview with Zibby, you talk a bit about how this is particularly important for women who feel this intense pressure to essentially, I'm completely paraphrasing, but be perfect in all ways, to have perfect bodies, to be perfect mothers, to do their jobs perfectly, to sort of have all the pieces be perfect, and to be so hard on themselves in this world. And I wondered if you could talk a little bit about this, like the kind of like turning off the kind of, you have this wonderful moment, like when you talk about like being in this essay, that Rebecca has an essay on Zibby Owen's amazing website, Moms Don't Have Time to Lose Weight, where you talk about like being, you know, extremely unkind to yourself. Anyway, if you could talk a little bit about that, I think it would be really wonderful for everyone out there.
I actually think it's a really natural segue, because I in my last answer, I probably could have come to this like natural point. So I appreciate it very much. But, you know, the first piece is that when you meditate, you start to hear the voices in your head. Usually there are a few up there, and often they're not your voice. They're most definitely not your voice. They're voices that you have been conditioned to listen to. And I think as women in particular, we're conditioned to listen to a lot of judgmental voices. You know, and I think the article that I wrote was about specifically body image. And you know, the interviewer, Zibby Owens, who's, you know, one of the greatest bookfluencers of our current moment, came out how she'd accepted this award, and she posted on social media that she's like holding this trophy, and she didn't like the picture and was really upset that she felt that she looked, you know, chubby or something, that she looked fat. And so I related to that really deeply. And I also felt really compelled to just ask the question, like, has there ever been a man in history holding an award who was more focused on his physical appearance than on the actual award? I'm not saying it never happened, but I'm saying that every woman can relate to that feeling. Whether we've accepted an award or not, we can very deeply relate to a feeling of kind of that being robbed of the moment, being robbed of maybe the joy of the moment, because we are abiding by these critical voices in our heads. And so in terms of being a mother, the voice of comfort, the voice of kindness came so naturally to me. The voice of like, it's okay, oh, like things are a mess. Oh, you just threw up in my ear. Like, that voice was there, right? But in my own mind, I needed a little bit of help. And so it's listening to the voice that's up there and maybe in the beginning gently replacing it. That can be a meditation technique. I've talked about it with my students. I used to teach a class downtown. It was at like 5:15 in the financial district. People just buzzed in, really hopped up and stressed out, and they had set their desktop computers to race to class. And oftentimes they would meditate with me and then they would go back to work. And in this class, there was a woman who told a story about her dog and just how she talks to her dog. And when the dog goes and gets into something that he shouldn't, she doesn't berate the dog. She doesn't say, oh, you dum-dum. Oh, how could you do that? You're so stupid. She just goes, hey, buddy, over here. And I think that that's a very gentle perspective to start to encourage in your own mind, in the landscape of your mind. Your mind in meditation wanders away, and instead of going like, oh, I messed it up again, you can say, come on back, buddy, we've got this. Or when you're having those moments of a low self-image or just feeling down, and it's what meditation gives us is this way of befriending our own mind. And it doesn't happen overnight, but that's what I've gotten. And actually, to your earlier question, I think motherhood was part of that journey for me, and that evolution was realizing that I would never ever speak to my child the way I sometimes speak to myself. And once I knew that, I thought, oh, we have some work to do, because not just for my own benefit, but also our children are seeing how we relate to ourselves. They're seeing and picking up not just what we say with our external voice, but how we are relating to our own kind of inner critic, and how hard we take things at times, or how hard we are on ourselves. And so that is, it's interesting that you got that from the book, but it is kind of a journey that I've been on, and that I know that a lot of people, particularly women, can relate to. So
yes, there's a podcast that you may listen to along with me called Forever 35.
Oh, I do sometimes. Yes.
And one of the hosts, Kate Spencer, who
Yes.
is wonderful and is a wonderful writer and just a wonderful human, she talks about this so much. And I actually suggested she read your book a while back, just when I'd read The Galley. She talks so much about attempting to not talk to herself in this cruel way. And it's a very popular podcast. Those of you out there who haven't listened to it, you really should. It's wonderful. But they get so much mail about this, like about people attempting to stop this. I think it's a problem for everyone, but mainly women. But we have a question. And I just want to, because there is a question, I just want to mention one more time that if you guys have questions, please put them in the Q&A box. I'm going to continue and ask Rebecca. We're a little bit running out of time, but I'm going to, I think, have time to ask her maybe another question before we move on to your questions, but please let me know. You have to type it in so that I know you have them. I want to shift gears and talk a little bit about writing. I have so many writing questions for you that I'm not going to have time to ask, but the big one that I want to ask is this. Okay, so I, like you, have tried and failed to read so many books on yoga and meditation. My house is filled with them. Like, we have hundreds of them, and I've tried so many times, and yours have really been the only ones that I've been able to read, other than maybe like Claire Dieter's book Poser, which is not really about
so good.
Yeah, so amazing, but it's not really a yoga book. And so it is about yoga, but it's really about other things. So I think in this world of, books on spirituality and what have you, your voice and your writing style really stands out in that the experience of reading your books, as I said earlier, everyone please forgive my redundancy, is more like the experience of reading a memoir. That feeling of kind of entering a book and kind of being taken by the hand by a writer and being like sort of, this is now I'm mixing metaphors, like getting in the car with them and kind of going on a journey with them. And both your books are so funny and written from such a place of empathy and comradeship and understanding. They're not dictatorial at all. You get this feeling that like you are just sort of in the world with us. And I love them so much. And the reason I'm going on about them again, despite the person who wrote in the chat, please shut up, basically, is because you kind of started life as a writer, or like intending to be a writer. And you had this yoga practice, and there's a way in which sometimes, you know, the engine of like something that we're doing just because we love it, not thinking it's going to be the sort of, you know, direction of our life, takes over. I think that happens to a lot of people. And I'm curious about, I have a few questions, but the big one I want to ask before we run out of time is, what writers have influenced you in your work?
Oh, I love this question. Yeah. So you're picking up on a lot of great things, and I always wanted to be a writer. I was an English literature major in college. Part of how I ended up writing the way that I do and writing about what I do was a function of what all writers face, which is just getting published, like what was viable for me, and how I could sort of elbow my way into things. You know, the main vehicle for that, the main driver, was the blog that I created in the heyday of blogs. And I think that's where I started to craft that voiciness. And it is in some ways maybe inspired by that period of the internet, of sort of being with people and on the ground and speaking directly to a reader. There are a lot of writers that inspire me. You've named one, Claire Dederer, who wrote Poser and then more recently Love and Trouble. I admire her a lot. It's funny, I used to be very even in terms of nonfiction and fiction. I used to be like very kind of split down the middle, and the pandemic forced me so hard in the direction of fiction. So more recently, it's been novels. I mean, my favorite book of the year was Lily King's Writers and Lovers. I loved it so much. I would hope to write like that. But along the way, I'm obviously influenced by people like Elizabeth Gilbert, who kind of, you know, broke the mold with Eat, Pray, Love back in the day. I'm a big fan of Anne Lamott. I find her to be like my patron saint of spirituality. You know, you and I have a rapport with Dani Shapiro, and I think that she similarly touches upon these themes of spirituality and in real life. And so, you know, all of that is sort of stuff that I percolate with. And then in terms of fiction, like I said, I love Zadie Smith. I love Meg Wolitzer. You know, that little piece about being in 6th grade at the National Seashore, like, if it were all grown up and were an incredible novel, maybe someday it could be The Interstings. You know, it's like that, the youthfulness or the stuff that we get obsessed with as kids and then comes back to us as writers. I could go on forever with this one. I also really admire Ann Patchett and the way that she's able to pivot continuously from fiction to essay to nonfiction. Like, she's another one that I love her voice no matter what she's doing.
Yeah, yes. Okay, we have a few questions here, and I'm hoping that Bonnie will let us just stay on long enough to answer them. I love Writers and Lovers so much, by the way, and I think you do write in that vein. So
I am a one-woman MLM for that book. I everybody buy it. I love it so much.
I get that. Okay, we have a question from the wonderful Julie Chavez, who is a wonderful, wonderful writer herself. I actually just read her first book, and everyone should buy it when it comes out. It's great.
Oh,
Okay.
the goods. What's it called?
It's called Little by Little.
Okay.
And it's fantastic. I think it's out in about 2 years, but I bet you could pre-order it pretty soon. So everyone watch out for it. Okay. Says, as someone who makes nearly everything into a pass-fail, what's a gentle way to incorporate meditation without succumbing to the desire to make it another task or achievement? This was one of my questions that I didn't get to ask. So I'm so happy. Thank you, Julie, for asking this.
It's so good. It is really cuts to the heart of the issue. So I'll relay it by way of a quick anecdote. I was struggling for a very long time, and by I mean long time, years, to meditate regularly. I wanted to meditate every day. I would like make a New Year's resolution, and you know what would happen by like February, I'd be a failure, right? And so then one year I just took every judgment, every parameter, every rule that I'd put in place, I took them away. So it no longer mattered if it was in the morning. It no longer mattered if it was in my house. It no longer mattered if it was at least 5 minutes. It just mattered that I did it. So it could be, I wake up, I forget that it's street cleaning, my car's about to be towed, and I sprint down the sidewalk in my pajamas, get in my car, move it, and then I sit in my parked car for 3 minutes and I meditate. Like that counted. Suddenly, that's a pass, Julie. And each day I just had to do something. There's this beautiful quote that I share in the book that I share with all my students very frequently by Alan Watts. And he says, so what is a good meditator then? One who meditates. And that's it. Like, I understand that there are apps that work really well. And, to some extent they gamify meditation. So they make you want to do it more. And I think that's really good to build the habit. I don't do them because I started before they existed, so I haven't had to integrate them. A lot of people do have success starting that way. But for me, it was to take the requirements off and just make the one requirement be that I do it. It's nice to start with a reasonable commitment, like 3 minutes, and we can do 3 minutes and just have it be, I set my phone timer and then I put it in airplane or whatever. I set the timer on the stove, 3 minutes. It doesn't have to look fancy. It doesn't have to be in the same place in your home. And then once you build up that kind of skillfulness, that habit, you'll be doing it, in the doctor's office, actually when you're waiting, is always very quiet and an oddly ideal place to meditate. I have a little bit of white coat phobia, so that's helpful for me. You can do it in the car, and then it just becomes part of your life. But it's, I think, start small, start reasonable, and take all of those, restrictions off of it and judgments and criticisms, because meditation is not a performance-based activity. It actually, the irony is that it can help you improve your performance in a great many areas of your life. But imagine it as the one place in your life where you cannot do it wrong, and imagine how freeing that would be to have a place like that.
It's almost, crazy to think about. I will tell you like one tiny thing, which is during the pandemic, I was having trouble. I have my own meditation practice that I also don't talk about, like my yoga practice, but I was having trouble meditating just because kids were always around. I have 3 kids and it was very hard to do anything, but I had to drive. There's a point where I had to drive my kids all over last summer, and I started using the drive to meditate. And this felt so wrong to me. So instead of listening to a podcast or music, I would just use the silence, the half hour and then I told my husband, the extreme meditator, and he was like, that's like the most challenging thing. Like, you're a more evolved meditator. And I was like, what? And I thought this was like really terrible. But anyway, so that's my advice for anyone who lives anywhere where they have to drive a lot. Not that you should take my advice, take Rebecca's advice. But okay, here's a question from Abigail Erdman, which is fantastic. She says, how is meditation like yoga for you? How does yoga enhance your writing? And how does writing enhance your yoga?
Okay, that was 3 questions, right?
Yeah, yes.
Okay, what was the first one? How is my meditation like my yoga?
How is meditation like yoga for you? Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, yoga is at its best meditation in motion. We say that a lot. For me, though, it was a very necessary kind of juxtaposition when I finally made meditation a separate entity, and when I treated it as such. Particularly because yoga had gotten so athletic, so vigorous, so movement oriented, that there was a period where I just knew internally, and we all need to kind of figure this out for ourselves, that I needed to be still. And so they are different means kind of to the same end, I guess. Like in Shavasana, at the end of yoga class, you ultimately become still. You know, the ancient practitioners, the reason that the asanas were even created was for the purpose of making the body supple enough so that it could sit in meditation for long periods. So they're the same, there are different ways of getting to the same place, I'll say. Yoga and my writing, is that the next one?
Yeah, how does yoga enhance your writing, and how does writing enhance your yoga?
Well, I think yoga and really all forms of exercise enhance my writing because they just clear my head and they get the ants out of my pants. And I really can't, I kind of can't be expected to write unless I move, either before or after. You know, now that I'm a mother, I can't be as precious about the way that I write. You know, I used to get my yoga or my exercise out of the way and then sit and write, and they would influence me very directly. Now I have to just take what I can get. And certainly if I am writing, I mean, I have the benefit of, I often write about topics related to yoga, meditation, the mind, the body, the spirit, what it means to have a body, what it means to move a body, what it means to have a mind, to live in our minds. And it does help, if I'm going to write about those things, to have, you know, done them and sort of been in that energetic space and moved my body and kind of have it with me. That goes with anything. Joanna, I don't know if you relate similarly, but if I'm writing about a certain activity or a period of my life, I try to put myself there, either with a form of movement, with scenery, very occasionally music. You know, the last scene of the book is with a Buddhist monk. And when I was writing that piece, I listened to our interview, and then I listened to Tibetan monks chant as I was writing and editing, so that it would kind of be there with me. And how does writing affect all of it? I don't know, except that it provides a great need for the rest of it. But I will say that sometimes my greatest ideas come while I'm out walking, or maybe running, or on the yoga mat. A line will come to me, you know, like my mind is just absorbed in the activity. It becomes its own meditation, and then, oh, coincidentally, a good line arises, you know. In the shower, like those things kind of famously happen because the mind it's now resting. It's like it's able to relax a little bit.
Yeah, or like while you're washing the dishes, sometimes there's that. Yeah, yes. Okay, last question. One of the buzzwords of the pandemic seems to be languishing. How can we use mindfulness and meditation to get back to feeling able to start and finish a task?
Oh, that's a wonderful question. Languishing did become the word of particularly a certain period of the spring or summer from that New York Times article. And I think there is a myth, you know, the book is about the myths and magic of meditation, or of mindful living rather. And there is a myth that meditation is passive, that it is inactive, that it is soft, maybe. I find that that's quite the opposite, that to meditate, to live mindfully means to face the moment, whatever shows up, however difficult. And it's quite the opposite of languishing, right? It's having the ability to compassionately recognize what's really going on and then act, right? We might meditate by sitting down and being still, but ultimately the reason we're doing it and what we get from it is the ability to act and the ability to show up, the ability to speak up if that's what is needed. There's a beautiful quote from Pema Chodron. She says, never underestimate the power of compassionately recognizing what's really going on. And so I think that's the key skill that is needed so that we don't languish, right? There is so much uncertainty that it can be so overwhelming. And of course we would languish, of course that would be a natural state, but ultimately we hope to cultivate the ability to then recognize, okay, what is needed here? What's the gentle voice that is needed? And what do we do now? Because one of my favorite teachers, Sharon Salzberg, is fond of saying, we don't meditate to sit in a room with our eyes closed, not speaking to one another. We meditate so that we can be in the world, so that we can be good friends to each other, so that we can, we can parent well, we can be present for our kids, we can show up and face the planet and how the planet needs us and how the global community needs us, and you can't do those things if you're an overwhelmed puddle. Although we have our moments, and that is a very valid human way to feel. That is totally an appropriate response to what has been happening. But then when you're ready to respond to the moment, meditation is a nice way to do that, to create that readiness, the steadiness and the readiness to respond.
That is such a great note to end on. I'm going to pass it back to Bonnie. Thank you.
Now you have a kitty cat.
She was making a lot of noise.
I agree. What a beautiful, beautiful note to end on. Something I think we can all sort of take with us moving through the rest of our evenings and even further on. Thank you, Joanna and Rebecca, for being here. What a lovely and enlightening conversation. I appreciate you both so much, and it was just lovely to be here. And thank you so much to our audience members who joined us today. It was lovely to have this community. The chat was just so positive and nice. There's some positive messages in there. So Rebecca and Joanna, if you haven't had a chance to read the chat, I'd recommend it. For anyone who's interested in purchasing a final sort of signed and personalized copy of the book, you can do so until 9 a.m. tomorrow with the link that I just dropped in the chat. But again, thank you all so much for being here. Thank you again, Rebecca and Joanna, and I hope everyone has a lovely evening.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Booksmith. We love you. Love you so much. For myself, I know Joanna feels the love, and I know that many of the yogis and participants, just our city would not be the same without you. We love what you do and what you bring, and are so grateful to see you on the other side of this pandemic. And it became like a duty and a privilege to buy all the books in the world that we needed to get through. So,
well, thank you. It is a pleasure to be a part of this community. And I can confidently speak for everyone at Booksmith when I say that. So thank you both so much. And I hope you have a great night.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody. Joanna, I love you. Thank you so much.